Hello, welcome to session 8. You get out of it what you put into it. Lessons from Two-Year Post-Baccalaureate Program. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone code of conduct that MERAC does not tolerate any. Oh, okay, I can. Hello, welcome to session 8. You get out of it what you put into it. Lessons from a two-year post-baccalaureate program. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone code of conduct that MERAC does not tolerate any form of harassment, discrimination, or hostile behavior. Attendees exhibiting such behavior will be asked to stop and are expected to comply. If they do not, MERAC coordinators will take appropriate action, including expelling them from the conference if necessary. I will link the MERAC code of conduct in the webinar chat. We'd like to thank Society of American Archivists for sponsoring this session and making this virtual conference possible. Founded in 1936, the Society of American Archivists is North America's oldest and largest national profession dedicated to the needs and interests of archives and archivists. SAA represents more than 6,200 professional archivists employed by the governments, universities, businesses, libraries, and historical organizations nationally. We will be utilizing the live transcript of the session for accessibility purposes. If you would like to hide the subtitles, simply click the live transcription button at the bottom of your application and then select hide the subtitle. And if your Zoom application is not maximized, you may need to click three dots, more icon, to turn off the subtitles. Please use Q&A feature to pose questions to the panel, and we will relay those questions to the panelists to close out the session. Finally, please remember and visit the pre-recorded poster sessions on YouTube link I'm placing in the chat. And we can start. Take it from here, Mary.
Thanks so much, Ilan. This is it's great to be with you all today. The conference has just been wonderful so far. My name is Mary Crauderueff, and I am the curator of Quaker Collections at Haverford College, which is a small liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia. And it was founded in 1838. We're coming up on our 200th anniversary soon. And I would like to introduce Anna Smith, who was our second Ann T. and J. Morris Evans Post-Baccalaureate Fellow. She just wrapped up with us and is in the middle of her first semester of grad school. Anna, do you want to say hi?
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Mary. As you mentioned, I was the 2022-2024 Ann T. and J. Morris Evans Postbaccalaureate Fellow, and I'm currently in my first semester of my MS-LIS program.
Awesome, thank you. So today's agenda, just so that you have an idea of where we're going, we just did our introductions. I'll give a bit of a background about the fellowship itself and about the implementation of it. We're going to do some Q&A. I'm going to ask Anna some questions about her experience, and then we're going to turn the tables. And Anna, I'm no longer her supervisor. Now she can ask me all of the questions that might be relevant to other folks who are, I imagine that one of the reasons you might be here this afternoon is because you're wondering whether, should we implement some kind of post-bac program. So then we'll have some concluding thoughts, some pros and cons, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll get to those at the end. So thank you all so much. In 2020, the library department hired its first inaugural Anne T. and J. Morris Evans Post-Baccalaureate Fellowship, which was supported by the Evans Endowment at Haverford. This fellowship was developed with the intention of fostering a mentoring experience for members of groups who are dramatically underrepresented in the libraries and archives field, including people of color. This also was built off of a one-year CLEAR grant that we had as a pilot project in 2015 to 2016 to also help evaluate how much work a postbac might be able to do during that year of time. So Morris, otherwise known as Maury Evans, his family has been involved with Haverford from beginning as the founders of the college, many generations of alums, and heavily involved in financial contributions to the college and particularly to the library, and involved in governing bodies of the college, including the Board of Managers and Corporation. Maury himself was very interested in digitization. This was back in like the late 90s, early aughts. And he donated very generously over the years to support the Quaker Special Collections digitization processes and digital scholarship using those materials. Thus, one of the main drives of this fellowship is also to do more of both of these things in honoring Maury's legacy. The way that the fellowship has been structured, there are two major projects during the tenure of the fellow at the college. They also participate in many aspects of the work of the department, doing reference service, sitting on our reading room desk, doing social media, helping as best as we're able to in scaffolding, describing and working with rare books and manuscripts, and then, of course, digitizing materials and uploading them into our online repositories. So one of the things, one of the ways that we frame this has been that they're focusing on building these archival and digital scholarship skills to ensure that they're prepared for their next career steps, including the potential of entering graduate school. I will pause here and say that we're 2 for 2 right now of both of our fellows who have left have gone directly into grad school, including our first one who actually started grad school while in the fellowship. The postbac also engages in the DEI goals of the department and the library, and gets to work with all of our curators, digital scholarship team, and undergrad student collaborators. So, I think I'm okay. We're now in the middle of the third fellowship, and until now, one of the main projects has remained the same. This is where I turn the slide, digitizing the Rufus Jones collection. Anna will be very familiar with this site. This is the back end of our Islandora with a selection of materials. So Rufus Jones was a preeminent Quaker historian, mystic, philosopher, who was a Haverford grad and professor and very influential in the liberal Quaker movement of the 20th century. The collection holds now 53 linear feet of materials, over half of which are correspondence to and from Jones over about 60 years. At this point, now that we have started our third fellow, who actually I can say I haven't updated this since Friday, but finished all of the digitizing that we're going to be doing, and is just wrapping up the metadata for us. So very excited. And at this point, over 61,000 images have been captured. So our second fellow, Anna Smith, who's with us here today, completed the reprocessing and rehousing of the collection. It shrank from 180 flat boxes to 123 Hollingers. She overhauled the finding aid, including rewriting the front matter, using our reparative language guidelines to be more inclusive of Jones's household and to be less aggrandizing of his life. Each of our fellows has an opportunity to supervise summer interns. For Anna's first summer, she started in August. I don't know how time works, 2 years ago. So for the first summer, planning, we worked together to hire the students, and we talked about best practices for supervising and mentoring the students, the interns. And then the second summer, I was like, all right, we have the job description, but now it's on you. Please, look at the applications, and she hired the students herself, and I only stepped in as needed when she asked for help. I was always there. I'll talk later about the structure, but we met every single week. And then we even this summer, the third post-bac started about 2-3 weeks before Anna wrapped up. And with that overlap, she was able to train him on digitization workflows and other elements of the post-bac. So now that this Rufus Jones piece is wrapped up, we're looking towards our next large digitization project, which will absolutely include the fact that we're coming up on our 200th anniversary in about 9 years from now. The second major project for each post-bac is a digital scholarship website. The first project was using digital versions of manumission documents in the collection to identify names, dates, and other important information that can be incorporated into a database and used for visualizations. Our first fellow, this is where like some of the things we learned. Our first fellow started in January of 2020. Yes, that 2020. But before that part happened, 2 weeks into the project, I left the continent for 4 weeks as a part of a work project on Quaker archives in Africa. So I came back in the middle of February, and a month after that, the campus shut down due to COVID. There were upsides and drawbacks to particularly the digital scholarship work happening during lockdown. One of the upsides was that we were able to keep one of our staff members on, one of our part-time staff members on, who was able to do some of that transcription instead of furloughing them. A downside is that when the website development was happening, we were still making boutique websites for basically every single project. And those are hard to get up and running. And by the time that it started to break and we launched it, and then by the time we wanted to like add new material and that it really truly broke for the first time, our post-bac had been gone for almost 2 years, and our digital scholarship team had completely turned over. So it is now back up and just stable enough to be public again, although it's also going through its final rounds of updates. This inevitably is about having a grant-based or a rolling sort of funding for digital scholarship projects with no sustainability planning baked into it. I'm proud of the work that David did and I supported, and giving amplification of the knowledge of Quakers having been enslavers. And we connected with various Quaker communities, and there's now a non-Haverford sponsored group who are researching each of the manumitted people to learn more about their lives after they were freed. And I will also say that our digital scholarship team that has turned over, the new folks are really strategizing around sustainability, recognizing that that's a key element if we're going to have post-bac projects as digital scholarship projects, that's something we have to incorporate. As I mentioned, Anna's larger project, besides for digitizing so much of Rufus Jones material, also digitized some new acquisitions from the Cope Evans family, and rebuilt our Cope Evans digital scholarship project. The Cope Evanses were a large Philadelphia Quaker family, Quaker families who intermarried at a few different points. And we have several of those collections from those families, 2 of which are primarily letters, which are both, of course, called the Cope Evans Family Papers, because what else would you call them? Starting in 2002, through the support of the same family, of the Evans family, Haverford began this digitization project as a pilot project for our first tri-college consortial digital library, along with Swarthmore and Bryn Mawr colleges. Over the next 16 years, about 4,000 items from 1732 to 2009 were digitized and uploaded by staff and students. The DS project first launched in 2014. It was refreshed in 2017 and 2019. And if you know anything about digital scholarship projects, you're like, wait a second, you're still revamping something that was launched in 2014. And yes, we are. We decided that instead of a refresh, that we would actually move the site onto a non-boutique site, and we chose WordPress for this. So over the course of 18 months, there were a team of us that worked on that vision for the site so that it was really clear. And as part of this work, I just want to emphasize the amount of work that Anna did, because she probably won't emphasize that herself. She recreated a 248-person family tree, reviewed the metadata of those 4,000 letters to improve it due to changing metadata standards over those 16 years of work, wrote data set essays, wrote 6 regular essays on different elements of the Cope Evans family, really shedding a greater light on how their wealth and status influenced Philadelphia and Philadelphia Quakers, and then also essays on the history of the project and the project in its current form. And she made incredible documentation that will be able to be used as reference materials for the project going forward. The site is still on our dev servers, as we'll talk about later. But it is actually queued up to actually be pushed to prod any day now, and hopefully will be before Thanksgiving. Before moving to the Q&A with Anna, I want to spend a few minutes on some logistical pieces of the post-bac. For me, the mentorship element of the job is one of the most important pieces. Skills are important, and they will help to pave the way for our fellows to get work. And also, this is a transition point for many of our fellows from undergraduate life to working a 9-to-5 job. I have developed a welcome packet for the fellows that are extraordinarily detailed. I try not to be a micromanager, but I do find that it can be helpful to be this detailed at the beginning, so the fellow can know that those unwritten rules that we sometimes have in workplaces are very laid out, and the fellow can then feel comfortable in our spaces and roll more smoothly into our library life. The fellow attends our library staff meetings, our departmental meetings, participates in strategic planning items as it pertains to their work, and we try to be as broad as we can about that. We aim to show them every part of all the different pieces of library life. This position is housed in special collections, but we are very incorporated into the rest of the library, and I want the fellows to be able to understand all the different pieces of an academic library. So starting with Anna, I've asked our library staff to take some time out, either individually or as small sub-departments, to talk about their jobs and how they came into librarianship. So this is everyone from the library director to our metadata librarians to acquisition or access services. So that's a bit of the background. So now, okay, well, that's a preview. I didn't incorporate just a Q&A slide. Apologies. All right, Anna, I have some questions for you. So that way back in the spring of 2021, 22. Okay, what made you apply to this fellowship?
Yeah, so I graduated from my undergrad in May 2022. So just about half of my time in college was under COVID. And so not only was I a little burned out, quite honestly, and the world was still kind of returning to normal, I also didn't get a lot of the in-person internship experiences that people might normally have. I had an internship scheduled for the summer of 2020, for example, and that was obviously canceled. So that was one reason. I wanted a little bit of time to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life before I started grad school and spent a lot of money on a degree that I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to get. And also, I come from a low-income background. I didn't have a library growing up in my school, and so I really didn't have much experience with libraries until I entered college, and so I wanted to learn more about libraries other than the one that was at my college and how they operated, and what all was out there. And so this opportunity really sounded like the perfect chance to build on my current skill set from my library job in college, but also learn something new. I didn't have a lot of experience with Quakers or the Society of Friends, and I also didn't have a lot of experience with digital scholarship, and I felt like that was a really important piece of where libraries are headed, and so I wanted to get that experience.
Awesome. Well, we're very glad that you applied. All right. We're going to do the top and the bottom. What were your 3 favorite parts of the fellowship?
I feel like it's hard to narrow it down to just 3. Obviously, one of my favorite parts was just getting to explore all the different collections in Quaker Special Collections and see what's out there. And learn about different archival practices and put those to use. And that was really valuable in being able to dive into one specific collection, the Rufus Jones papers. You can see the transformation from the old flat boxes into the new Hollingers, and that was just very satisfying visually to do. But spending so much time with that one collection, I was able to really see it in a different way, and that's where I learned about the story of, as you mentioned, Ada Smith, Rufus Jones's longtime housekeeper, who was born to formerly enslaved parents in Virginia, and her story had not really come to light in various biographies of Jones or in his legacy on campus, and so I was really fortunate to be able to develop an exhibit to bring her story back into the forefront and to put her life in conversation with Jones's. The next piece, the more unexpected piece, was learning more about library life, from sitting in on staff meetings and job talks to meeting with different people in the library and learning about their positions. And the job talk piece, I think, has been one of the best things about my time of being able to see a job talk before I have to give one and know what's expected of me and how to structure one. I think that's one of the things that is one of the more hidden skills that they don't really teach you. And so being able to come into grad school knowing what I might need to do to get a job has been really valuable. And finally, being able to work on the digital side of archives was really nice. I hadn't had a lot of experience with that previously, but I feel like that's increasingly where archives are heading. And that's one of the advantages, I think, of being at a smaller place like Haverford, of being able to do so many different things versus where I am now, which is more siloized. So I was responsible for the Rufus Jones papers from end to end. I rehoused the collection, I updated the finding aid, I digitized it, I created the metadata. And so I could see each step of the process and figure out which part kind of spoke to me the most, and really make of it what I wanted.
Awesome. Yeah, you did have a particular time of like, we have had some turnover here in the library in the past few years, and so you've definitely had at different levels been able to see those happen, and that definitely is something that always happens. You know, something that David was able to participate in that you didn't get to participate in was he actually got to be part of the strategic planning part, like at the planning part of it, whereas like you help to implement pieces. So I think that that's also one of those interesting things as you get each of those. Everybody's going to get a little something different too. What are the 3 hardest things? Let's talk about that.
I think some of the hardest things were also some of the best things. Like part of my position was I worked on the reading room desk for about 6 hours a week. And then, as you mentioned, I also supervised interns, and that was a new experience of supervising someone who I might only be a couple of years removed from. And so building those leadership skills and soft skills was really important. I also learned that I definitely do not want to be a reference archivist, um, which is a valuable thing to learn. And so, but I can still use the things that I learned in other aspects of whatever I do in the future. And I still found it incredibly valuable and rewarding. But it's seeing, of course, it's a 2-year position. It's a very short time span to move several states away for 2 years, and then just as you feel like you're settling in, be ready to move on to the next thing, which is a reality of a lot of library jobs, unfortunately. Too many library jobs. But knowing that I had a hard deadline was pushed me to figure out exactly what I wanted to learn and how could I accomplish that in the time that I had. The downside of that, though, was external factors like, as you mentioned, the CoPEVN site is not fully published yet, and because of various staffing changes and things like that, yes. That is what the site will eventually look like, but for the first few months of my fellowship, there was no digital scholarship librarian. And so that kind of pushed things toward the end of my fellowship a little bit more. And so there were some things out of my control.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've heard some of the good things and some of the hard things. If you could go back in time and tell yourself in 2022 whether or not to still apply for the fellowship or to accept it when it was offered to you, would you have done it?
I think I would without a second thought. I think it has left me so much better prepared for graduate school, and it's made me more sure of not only what I want to do in life, but also more sure of myself and my decisions. In my current position as a graduate assistant, I can rely on some of my past experience to offer solutions or alternative avenues for something. And having this experience has also let me be able to get that assistantship and help alleviate some of the financial burden of grad school, and really allowed me to break into a field that can be very difficult to break into.
Awesome. Retrospectively, as you're looking at, you're a couple months out of having left, what are things that you would have liked to have learned, but you didn't have the opportunity either for time or for we don't have the staff that does that or whatever the thing is? Yeah.
I think I had the opportunity to do a lot of things, and I was able to kind of mention that, hey, I'm interested in this thing, and you would give me the latitude to go explore that. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of external factors of staffing or priorities and budgets and things like that. So I think leaning into more the digital scholarship side a little bit earlier would have been nice, so that I would be able to wrap up the CoPEVN's project while I was still a fellow, because I feel like once you're no longer attached to an institution, your projects kind of fizzle out a little bit when you're not there to kind of propel it along. But on the whole, I think I accomplished much more than I thought I would be able to.
The list of things, when I go back to it, the list of things that you accomplished was just incredible. So I can talk about more of that in a few minutes. So I had talked about like the mentoring part of like element of the fellowship. Can you talk a little bit about like what that looked like, and what role it played in terms of like the larger program experience for you?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we met every week. We met every Monday at 9:30 for the most part. And having that structured meeting time where we could not only check in about how my projects were going and what I needed to move things along, but also my hopes and dreams, both during the fellowship and after, um, allowed me to start building my network, which is so important in the job hunt in this field, and pursue things that I found interesting. Like reparative description was not in my job description, but as I was working on the students papers, I was like, I'm finding things in the collection that I don't think are represented in the finding aid that really should be. Um, or this thing is described in maybe not the best way. And so I can say that I would like to spend more time on this part, and you would say yes. Um, and so being able to have that support to follow my interests was really valuable, and just having that weekly structured time to check in and make sure that I wasn't feeling adrift in this new place was really important.
Awesome. Yes, and sometimes it would be like, yes, but you have to wait until this other thing because we need to make sure that on your monthly reports that you still are scanning for, keeping track for our grants. So, yeah, awesome. All right. Your turn.
Yes. Now I get to ask the hard questions. Um, so, what did you get out of the experience?
Um, this is a great question. So at this stage, and for this one, for your fellowship, I had input on what the projects might look like a bit. And I was the hiring manager, so I did all of the like, chairing the search committee and walking all the way through, like going all the way through that process, all the way through to, picking up the phone and offering you the job. And I think that that's something that is always a great opportunity to learn new things of how do we do this? How do we make this sustainable? I think the first one was hard, right? Like working from 20, David was with us from he's now like a librarian in New Jersey, and it's awesome. And he was with us from 21, like basically January 2020 to December 2021. And those just were hard years for everybody. And I think something that I really learned was that I needed to think about my leadership skills differently and my project management skills differently. When there's really these larger ongoing projects that are not just my projects, but are somebody else's primary responsibility to actually do. Um, and I'm sort of like making sure that things are happening along the way. I really had to challenge myself to get better, which I think is why hopefully I didn't micromanage too much, but I wanted to like set up structures so that like I could release you into doing the work. But I think that that was one of the things that I feel like really happened was that leveling up. And I think it was also something of like of looking at the smaller times that we were able to engage in terms of conversations, in terms of your hopes and dreams and all of those things, that help when like the world is happening around us. And like it was personally for me a hard couple of years. And I think I was really grateful to have set things up in a way that meant that when I wasn't able to give you the one-on-one attention that you deserved, that I knew that you still had it, right? So I think that's something that I really that I learned was how to set folks up better.
I think the scaffolding that you set up was incredibly helpful and not at all micromanaging. Um, and I think also in our meetings, if you maybe didn't have the answer or the bandwidth to talk about something, you could always point me to someone who did, or some other resource, like other people in our department. Like our head of special collections who took me to the Rare Book Fair in Philadelphia, which was an experience I might not have had otherwise. And so again, building that network of not just you, but all the people that you know, and all the people at Haverford was really special.
Awesome.
And so is there anything that you wish I had been able to do that I wasn't able to?
I wish we could have kept you on full time. I think that this is for me, like as a manager, we're a small department, right? Like special collection in terms of the curators, like there are 3 curators, 3 full-time curators. And so to have a post-bac, like the scaffolding that happened, like by the end, like I could just be like, hi, can you please do this reference request? And there needed to be no setup, no like, oh, hey, like remember to use this database or anything like that. I could just be like, please do this thing. And you'd be like, I got it. And so to have someone that like now I'm teaching the new post-bac those things, which is great. And I love the programmatic element of that teaching. And also it's hard because we're a small department. And so having another full-time person just to keep on after that scaffolding would have just been really great.
I also wish I could have been full-time. We had a secret plan of me being hired after grad school. But I think one of the things that was positive about being short was I had to be really intentional about building documentation and for the next person to come along and maybe have an easier time figuring out some things that took me a while to figure out. And building that documentation really forced me to consider the hows and whys of what I was doing and how I might teach someone how to do it. So in a way, I was able to build some mentorship skills of my own.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that like I had the introduction and everything, the orientation for you in those first 6 months, but I think you know, so like the big thing that happened for me was one of my colleagues and dear friends passed away about 6 months into your fellowship, right? And she was our metadata librarian, and we have a new very amazing one now, but she was all about documentation and seeing all of the things that like we were able to keep that she had made, but we were about to lose because people didn't realize it, really made me turn towards that emphasizing. And I really appreciate that you also leaned in and I into that, where I was like, we have to document everything 3 times more. You know, I don't think, hopefully it didn't happen quite as aggressively as that, but yeah, I think that that's part of those, like how our life impacts our work and can change it in that way. Yeah.
And so building on that, how do you approach mentorship?
Yeah. So it's definitely, I have this like this bit, you know, 2 to 3 page document that's also like, here's where you go to find out about your medical benefits. And also like when you're sick, here's my phone number to text me. So there's some of that like logistical stuff that I'm just like, this is information that you need to download. But also it's a resource you get to keep, you know, you don't have to memorize it. And I also think that it's iterative. I think we all need something different at every different time. Like you need something different than David needed. You know, David was our first fellow and he actually was several years out of undergrad. Whereas like, you know, you're coming out of you came directly out of undergrad. And our current fellow, Owen, also came right out of undergrad. And still, even both of you need different ways of being mentored. So understanding that there's flexibility, our brains work different, but also knowing that there are goals that have to happen based on funding sources, the role of the fellowship. You know, I can't just be like, oh, actually, like you're interested in this thing that is completely out of scope. Sure, spend 6 months on it, right? But to be like, okay, I know you're really excited about this. You can go down this rabbit hole a bit. Like, how can we support you also in the scope of the job? And also like one of the big pieces was that holistic piece about understanding what academic librarianship as a whole. Because, you know, you're at an academic library that's very different from ours now, but I wanted you to see like, oh, this is what we do in our small shop and kind of in the breadth of it. And, you know, a public library is going to look really different. And then this is the like, you get out of it what you put into it piece. You know, that slide is not aligned. That's sort of, you know, there we go. All right. If you looked at like to the audience, you know, if you looked at what the job description is for this position, and then you looked at what Anna actually accomplished in her 2 years, you would find those things and also probably another page plus worth of work. You know, creating those workflows and documentation that you did on like 10 different things, maybe 15, different parts of our digitization that like just had like 10-year-old, like the workflow still technically worked, but you're like, there's like 5 steps in between this one step that have only been told verbally. Like, we're going to write these down. I found something more efficient, like I found a way to do this more efficiently, and then I'll create the workflow and documentation. And you didn't have to do that, right? Like those are the things that like you now get to carry that with you because you put it in here, right? And I think that that is just a really incredible gift to the projects that we have here at Haverford, as well as hopefully to yourself of, you know, I think someone looking at a post-bac position, I think hopefully anyway, is looking for what you can put into it. I think it's the same as library school. Like you can just be a little bit more passive, but if you kind of lean into that, like, oh, like, is there something else about this? Or like, this is a little bit weird. Like, what is happening here? You know, you brought up potential issues with work from previous projects that need to be completed or completely fixed. So like sometimes it led to more work for you, like more digitization. But these were ideas that you had that I, as curator, I'm just like enough removed away that I didn't see them. So yeah, those are some of the things. Well, thanks for engaging in some of this conversation. We have like 15 minutes left total, so I want to make sure that we get to some Q&A, although I'm not seeing too much. We have some concluding thoughts. So we're not quite at our Q&A section yet. But definitely folks feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section. So maybe we can talk for a moment about maybe both of us can just talk for a moment about the pros and cons of a program like this. I think we've talked about some of them, but maybe just in that more direct way. Like, what are some of the pros for you?
I think the biggest pro is being able to get that experience before grad school, not only so that I know what I want to do, but because this field can be so hard to break into if you don't have those connections already established. It's kind of the chicken and egg problem of you need experience to get a job, but to get a job you need experience. And so having this position that explicitly did not want experience was really unique. And just having the opportunity to explore my interests and being a postdoc fellow, I did not have to attend all the meetings that you have to attend. And so I had that time to find my interests and maybe pick up some projects that had been languishing for a while that just no one had the time to do, just based on my own interests.
That was such a pro, such a pro. I think that's something that I kind of alluded to it earlier with you just being able to accomplish so much, and that by the end I was really just giving you projects, and also a lot of the times you were coming to me with those projects, and it'd be like, okay, like how can we incorporate this in? And it really just helped so much departmentally. Um, how about some of the cons? I know one of the cons, besides for the fact that like I just wish we could also just you know, keep adding people to the department so that we could get more work done. But one was is that we weren't able to post a salary where I wanted to. And we're looking at changing that this upcoming time. Both this past time and for the person we have now, I wasn't able to do a lot of that negotiating. But we've been starting to do some benchmarking on that. But it really made it hard to feel good super ethically about that. And I know that that's a hard thing as well. Coming right from undergrad, whether you have loans or want to be saving for grad school, like there's so many reasons to be paid enough, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest con, but that's a con for a lot of library jobs. And a lot of fellowship programs might offer some other more tangible benefits like a laptop or housing or things like that. And I don't think those were essential for the position, but it made me very sad to have to delete everything off my laptop when I finished, just as I had gotten everything set up how I wanted it. But I think even just having the experience of applying for a job and learning all about benefits and even as I started on like job talks and things like that, learning more about how the library pay and the hiring process works was valuable.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up by talking like just a little bit because I also see we have some questions coming in. Um, you know, hopefully something that y'all have figured out is that each of these fellowships have looked really different. Like the job descriptions have stayed like fairly consistent. And also they have all been influenced by different sorts of things. One of the things, Anna, you didn't talk about was that there wasn't quite, like you had done all of this digitizing, but there wasn't quite enough time to actually get it all uploaded into our system. And that is something that our post-bac has been having issues with. It's finally resolved, and he has been able to start uploading things again. But now there's like a 6-month backlog of materials to upload into Islandora, right? So like there's always going to be something, and so how to be accommodating for that. And also like I think at the end of the day, this is something that I feel like has been, throughout my archives career so far, and I think goes a long way back, is what projects should be done by permanent staff and not a rolling staff person, right? Some of those digital scholarship projects, as you were saying, like sometimes they're just without, like, even though we have a digital scholarship staff person, like if they're doing 10 things, but this isn't a constant project, then things are happening, right? So, so those are sort of the things, the bigger sorts of things. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing, and
So there are questions, 2 questions. Would you like me to read it to you, Mary?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
So
One is
Hillary
for
has,
you, one is for Anna, actually.
yeah, I have those right here. So for Anna, how did your experience with the fellowship shape how you're thinking about your career path or the directions of what you're doing in career and graduate school?
So I think the digitization aspect of the fellowship was really one of my favorite parts. In undergrad, I worked in my college's archives where I had experience processing collections and doing the general work of a student assistant. But I hadn't had the opportunity to do some digitization work or metadata. And I'm actually currently working as a graduate assistant at my university's digitization services department. And so that's probably the clearest carryover between the two. But I think the metadata part has also been really interesting to me. That was something that I did not have experience with in undergrad, and I didn't really know was a thing. But I really enjoyed being able to take the time to do that item level description that might not happen in a finding aid, and learning about all the different standards. And so I'm hoping to go further down that path. And I think, as I mentioned previously, the digital side of archives is increasingly important to being able to get a job in this field. And so having the opportunity to learn some of those skills was really helpful.
Awesome. All right. Then Hillary's question for me is, what criteria did you use to evaluate fellowship candidates? Great question. So one of the things that I did, both for Anna and David's, which has changed for Owen's because the college has changed their systems, is that I was doing anti-bias training with the search committee before we even looked at candidates. And then we would set up a rubric based off of the job description to kind of help us evaluate what kinds of experience we might be wanting people to have had enough of, so that we know that they're interested enough in library school that they're going to have success, but also not so much that it's like, okay, you're ready for grad school, just like, that's not quite what this is, right? We wanted people who are interested in that, like, there's like 8 ways this could go, and I'm interested, like, I want more experience. This past year, we sort of had this like weird, like we got caught in like this weird place where like our HR was starting to implement like their own rubrics and how we were supposed to do things. But we had already put in like the job description for our next post-bac. And so this is something that I'm learning like for next time, is that we need to like word things really differently. Is because as we were working in the search committee together, it was like, should have, this kind of experience. And it's like, it led to confusion among the search committee members of, well, how much is enough? Like, are we supposed to like interview the ones at the top or the bottom or the middle? Like, what's happening? And so I'm working with our library director to talk more about that, to be prepared for next time. Because we want people like who are in that middle space, that I think we just have less flexibility with the criteria. But the way that our HR sets it up, we have like our minimum qualifications are like, the things that are required, and then the like the sort of like the proficiencies, and then sort of the like the bonus, I guess, the preferred. And so we kind of base it off of those. But I would also be happy to talk with you more about it. I think there are some good things and also hard things about that. Yeah, I think we were looking, like, the conversations are like, it's hard to evaluate a post-bac, right? You want people to be successful, you want them to be able to do many things. And also, like, we really want to be supporting people who have not been able to, for various reasons, have had all of this experience beforehand. Like, if I had applied to this, like, I had worked at many places before I went to grad school, like, I don't think I would have qualified for this, right? Like, we've certainly been like, oh, we know, like, this person has a lot. I think that, like, we want it to be a match of like what people are learning from us, as well as what like we are gaining in terms of their experience, if that makes sense. It's confusing, it's hard. But I think ultimately it's worth it to put that time in. I think we would have time for
Yeah, we
one
have.
more question if there is any. Do you have any?
I have one, but if
Sure.
there's nobody else. So, Mary, to both of you actually, so it looks like the program is more suitable to an academic environment, an academic institution. And if one, like let's say me, would like to take this program and apply at Lehigh University, what do you think my number one concern should be what is the priority? How will I'll sell this to my, let's say, administrators?
Yeah. Anna, maybe you can speak from like the like having been through it and what it's giving you piece, but I can talk like from our side, like from Haverford side of like how, you know, we decide to move forward with it. I mean, so like there's two things. One is to have the staff support. You know, we support student workers all the time, but they work most of the time during the summers they work 35 hours, but otherwise, you know, they're working like 4 to 10 hours a week, and having someone that can basically help run a search, hire, and support and mentor someone for 40 hours a week, 35 hours a week. That is a big thing to consider. And then the other one is money, is how are you going to support it? You know, we're really lucky, we're fortunate to have this endowment that we can pull from. But it is also like at a certain point, like that big also is like, there's also a level there. So I think that that's in terms of sustainability. But also like, we haven't like ever posted it anywhere, and I didn't go through it here today, and I could have, we could have set this up in 8 different ways. But one is like the list of everything that Anna was able to do, that most of which we would never have had time to do with the staff that we have. Yeah.
Good,
Anna,
thank
do you have
you.
anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is also very special about this program is that it's not just for graduates of Haverford, which a lot of fellowship programs limit applicants to graduates of their own college. And that can be incredibly helpful in helping set up your graduates for success. But this also allowed me to bring in my own perspective and experiences from someone outside of what we call on campus the Haverford bubble, and think about things a little bit differently, and but still gain that experience and connection. And I think Mary too has consistently advocated for better wages and better experiences, and that was even if I didn't get as many benefits from that, it helped set up for future success. And again, the fact that I didn't have the responsibilities of a curator or someone higher up meant that I could do all the projects that needed a little more focus than a typical student worker, but didn't need the eyes of a full-time curator.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a benefit for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks for institutions that support academically and economically our great students. Well, I think this is the end, and thank you all for joining us. Thanks to our presenters, and thanks again to Society of American Archivists for supporting this program. And please go ahead and watch and join the other programs also. Next session, I believe there's a good on for the page. They will be telling about their product. Thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone coming and for watching this later.
Thank you.